Really a warm welcome, Dr. Pramod Varma. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I have lots of questions on my head, and in this limitation of time, I also want to open it up to the audience in this later part of the session.
Innovators must rise up. They put up their hand and say, I don't mind playing the game. And here's a playground for us to play as a billion people waiting for the solutions to come to them. I think Aadhar gave that belief that we can build our own level playing ground, some sort of level playing ground for our own innovators. If you're all going to be entrepreneurs, that's one learning you need to do. Never explain features. Maybe I should do that.
This episode of Sushasan on Campus comes to you from IIM Bangalore. Bangalore for long has been the technology capital of the country. But when it comes to governance, one thing we've done really well over the last decade is to create population-scale digital public infrastructure. Today my guest is someone who has been figuratively and literally the architect of this DPI. I'm talking about Dr. Pramod Varma, the former chief architect of Aadhar, the chief architect of the Unified Payments Interface or UPI, and the architect of most layers of what we today know as the India Stack. Don't miss out this energetic and inspirational conversation of Sushasan on Campus.
I think that's a good note to get started on. And I can tell you, as far as India's digital journey is concerned, there are a few handful of people who can talk on it with authority. We have one of them here, which is Dr. Pramod Varma. And a lot of people say in the development space, in the ecosystem, that Mr. Nandan Nilekani is the de facto CTO of India, has been the CTO for the last decade and continues to be the Chief Technology Officer. If you extend that analogy, then I would say Dr. Pramod Varma has been the Chief Architect of India and has really played a critical role in designing architecting almost all of the digital public infrastructure that we know of today. So really a warm welcome, Dr. Pramod Varma. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I have lots of questions on my head. I know there's limitation of time. I also want to open it up to the audience in this later part of the session. But really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Thank you for having us. Thank you for being patient. I know we are quite late, but stay with us. Hopefully it's useful session.
Yeah, and I see really my role as that of a bridge. I was here 15 years back in this very hall, attending Vista, participating in different competitions and so on. Now I'm more closer to the ecosystem that you are part of. So I hope that I can kind of bridge this thing between the audience and you.
And I was never good enough to be there, so I think they're all much more privileged than I am.
Yeah, they're definitely privileged. Now it all boils down to what all of us make of that privilege. Great. So let's start from where it all started, which is Aadhar. Aadhar is the first kind of thing that got built in this journey, digital journey of India. And I know that there were three objectives as you were designing Aadhar or architecting Aadhar. One was an objective of scale. It was always from the beginning designed for scale. Second was of inclusion. You didn't want to leave anyone kind of behind. And third was of privacy and security. And I've heard you talk about in the past that to ensure all three of this, the principle that you adopted was the principle of minimalistic design. If you can explain that, what does it really mean? How did it manifest and how did it ensure these three objectives?
Yeah, actually there was one more objective, which is innovation. Very unusually, it was not seen as an identity card project, which is very, very common to do that, right? When you issue identity, you issue identity cards to people. But we thought of that system as an identity platform with open APIs, in one sense application programming interfaces that allow other systems to become efficient, faster, cheaper, the way they want to leverage. So innovation was a fourth vector. So the question on minimalism, it was such an important decision that we had to make, and minimalism played in not only this, in everything we did subsequently, right? Evolvability, sustainability. If you look at everything, minimalism plays, and it's very counterintuitive. Actually, you're right. That's counterintuitive for engineers and product, and we come from product to engineer, right? We want to build more features. We want to have more stuff in our product. Less is not, what you look for. So, asking the question, why do you need that? Why do you need that? Why don't we remove that? Was a very, very counterintuitive. It was counterintuitive for us. It was counterintuitive for government. So I start with this. In Sri and Vittal, set up a committee. He was retired by then, and he was brilliant. He led the committee to decide what attributes, what fields will go into Aadhaar. And that was the story. And that's when some of us were volunteering. I quit my commercial career, in one sense, and volunteered for Aadhaar. And sitting in Delhi, and first of all, I'm not a Delhian, I'm in the South India, solid, right? All get here. And it's not obvious coming there into Delhi and seeing the power in that room. Power means official power. Home secretary, home secretaries of, finance secretary. And this is like scary. I have no idea what it means to be in that room. And everybody's creating opinion, deciding what to go. And but I think what really played out, and it was very natural for everyone to say, if you're going to enumerate 1 billion people, we should use that opportunity to ask few more questions, right? Whether they have a house, Paka house, Katra house, whether their education, their economic status. When will we get a chance like this? To give 1 billion people are going to stand in line. So it was so natural for everybody to say, let's include that also, let's include this, let's include that. And we were thinking, my God, if you include all that thing, it's just an identity project, right? We don't need economic status. We don't need cultural, religious, anything. And that during that time, caste census was supposed to kick in. So we were terrified that they would put caste into Aadhaar, and we didn't really want, because it didn't make any sense for an identity. Digital identity means, it didn't matter to us. So we used inclusion as the argument, and privacy was less argued. It's very interesting. When you sit in large committees, you don't question the committee itself. You don't question the intent of the committee, saying, you are outsiders, you don't trust the government, and so you don't collect. It's a very bad way to argue to them. So
you argued on inclusion.
Inclusion was a better argument because their intent is genuine, and most leaders were sitting there genuinely interested in solving large inclusion problem. Before in 2009, we had less than 20% bank accounts, 17%.
So we don't capture that.
Nobody had bank accounts.
We didn't capture that.
So we wanted inclusion. That was the argument. So to include, we made the argument that the more questions you ask, the less people we will include. And that was a very interesting argument. And even things like, I know you're aware of this. Name, first name, last name. We had at least few hours of debate whether we should have first name, last name in the passport, or we should have just name. And we said name because we had actually India has no first name, last name. I said no. We have names like Om. That's it. There's nothing around it. Like 2 letters. We don't have 1 letter name. I don't think we have come across that yet. But what's in a name? Who's talking? And with names with all gods, goddesses names, right? Like in some states we have multiple names. So what is first name, last name? What is middle name? There's nothing. So finally we argued on one name, field called name, and then we had things like date of birth, and we realized no, date of birth is not obvious to half the country. So we had this age, and date of birth was. It's not mandated, and could just declare age. And so removing every such attribute, we argued this. If you ask for, it was very common to ask father/husband. You say a government form, at least 10 years ago. you will see a very common thing, and people will wonder why not wife's name? Why no? Because we are all, liberal thinkers, right? And we are wondering why only men showing up there. But the real question you ask is that why not? How do homeless or orphans going to get Aadhaar? If you insist on father, mother, and all, what happens to leprosy patients? What happens to homeless? And I still remember going out, doing a Delhi government supported a specific enrollment camp in the night for homeless, because that's the only time they would come back to the centers. Otherwise they are on the street. It's amazing how inclusion, that one thing, can actually create such compelling argument for minimalism. But minimalism subsequently helped us in Supreme Court significantly. The fact that we have just 4 attributes, we don't even know the purpose of Aadhaar, how you're using Aadhaar, we don't understand location, we don't store any of that in the system. It was so minimalistic, it helped privacy, and interestingly, it also helped adoption. Why? Because the more we would have captured, the more ministries we would have pissed off. Simple as that, right? If you capture blood group and blood health record, the health ministry is going to be very unhappy about it. Or finance ministry. So I think not capturing anything actually didn't threaten anybody else's stuff. So these are all nuanced learning. How you can that at this scale. Our scale came from minimalism because we had so little to capture. We could just do it 1 million a day. 1.5 million enrollments we were doing a day. Yeah. That's how we got 7 years, 6.5 years, we got to 1 billion people. So
great. That's a big learning, and it's, as you said, counterintuitive. Right? You're saying that you're giving the inclusion argument to exclude fields.
Correct.
And that worked.
Yeah. And it worked out.
Otherwise, the process stuck in Supreme Court. It's where
Yeah. And if you look at the various identity projects around the world, you would see 50 fields, 25 fields quite casually, because they would say, how do I? And most identities that's another very thing. And you know it very well. Aadhaar was weird in one sense, that it didn't have any entitlements attached to it. That means it didn't even give you citizenship rights, right? It was nothing to do with citizenship. It does nothing. It didn't give you. So people used to wonder, why bother? Why are you even doing this, right? Are you supposed to give you bad-looking laminated card, which I don't think anybody likes your own Aadhaar photos anyway. So it's one of those things. Then do what? You guarantee nothing. You give zero entitlement. It was very complicated. But because of that, we got everything else adopted. Actually, very, very fun.
And that was the first layer.
Foundation.
Really the Aadhaar.
Yes, very well named also.
Of everything that came subsequently. And what today we know as the India Stack is nothing but a set of layers of digital public infrastructure, one feeding into the other in some sense, and together providing us that kind of platform on which solutions can be built. So can you explain for everyone that how did different layers come about subsequently, and how one led to the other?
So Aadhaar, I think this is what you realize. Aadhaar success was because, again, it was so minimalistic, it didn't threaten anyone. Everybody found value. So we had to articulate, and if you're all going to be entrepreneurs, that's one learning you need to do. Never explain features. Nobody wants to hear your product features. They want to hear the value, that they are going to get. Because we are loving now our features. So I'm telling you, this is a trap we all fall in. We explain all the features, right? So we really found a way, and Nandan was masterminded, and Shankar and so on, brilliantly articulated. We had different value proposition for different people we would meet. So when we meet RBI, we would have a very different value proposition. Finance Ministry, very different. Health folks, very different. States, when you go, because at the end of it, it's a federal system, very different, and political differences occur. At that time, Congress was ruling, but Gujarat was then the Chief Minister, now Prime Minister Modi. But each of them found value. If I use Aadhaar, it gives me a win. If you can't articulate their win and their value, we can never sell our product, right? So it was very, very nicely captured. And that created adoption, and adoption created success, right? So that's how 1 billion people. But when Prime Minister Modi came in 2014, He was already digital. He realized digital is the only way to reach 1 billion people. There is no way physically. Banks would never open. They can't open 600,000 villages bank branches. This makes no sense, right? Companies open AC, office, UPS, computer, and who will go to as an officer? You don't want, because the children are studying somewhere else. You want to be more closer to urban tier 1, tier 2 cities. So nobody goes. So how do you reach? How do you get financial inclusion? How do you get health inclusion, education? Technology was the only lever. He really knew that. And when 2014 came, before that, I think the real success was this. I think that's one thing we all realized. It's the same reason all of you are raising hands. When we realize, is India, do we believe in India? Is that belief? Is such, you take it granted, we Indians didn't have belief. And it was one of the reasons why we ran away to other places or found other places shores better than here. We just didn't believe that we can do anything in this country would improve. I think that state to change. The belief drives much of our decision, by the way. Otherwise, why would you go do crazy stuff? It's almost impossible to do. It's because we believe, and we believe in wanting to do it, and believe that we can. Aadhar brought that belief. Aadhar brought belief in government that we can pull off massive projects across the country. And that drove to Digital India. I think when he came, he had already started talking about Digital India. And that's when he gave himself 100 days and standard stuff. So 1 year later, 2015, is when Prime Minister launched. But 2014, we were already working. We were already looped in. And then we started working on e-sign. E-sign is a protocol that allows digital signature, because digital signature means less paper. Less paper means less cost. And less cost means more inclusion. Very straightforward rule. And DigiLocker. DigiLocker and thing was actually, I wrote both those papers with Ministry of IT. In 2013 I started working on it. 2014 I sent the paper in July. I still remember, I still have the original. Maybe I should do it now. first documents we wrote and all this stuff. And then sent it in, and then he launched DigiLocker and e-sign as part of Digital India initiative, which was an umbrella initiative. And 2013, we also started working on very early UPI. Nobody even knew. And then Dilip, Asti and I started discussing what would it take to push our payments to next orbit. And 2014, we started writing the protocol, UPI protocol, because UPI was a network play. It was not a platform play. We had fintechs, everybody we wanted to bring. We wrote that 2015, we piloted under Raghuram Rajan was then the governor, so huge supporter. And then 2016, we launched, and then BMO happened. So serendipity, right? When you are crazy ambitious goals, sometimes it's in lack opens up, and then after that COVID increased digital further.
e-KYC also happened.
e-KYC also happened, and e-KYC is a very funny story. Aadhar e-KYC was the first hit, and this is one of those things again. Aadhar very much focused. The last vector, innovation, was very key to us in Aadhar. So we launched Aadhar open APIs, authentication API and e-KYC API, even before we launched enrollment. We published our API specs and started doing sandbox with developers. So it's very funny that we were thinking, because what is the use of issuing identity to 1 billion people if nobody is using it, right? So demand side driver was much more than supply side. This issue ID was one number, good number to track, but how many people are using it was even more important for us. And 2012 we launched e-KYC, and it was pretty much used by banking. At that time we started with no frill account during the Congress era. It was called no frill account. Subsequently boosted by Jan Dhan as a massive 490 million account, mostly women, mostly women. And Finance Minister a couple of months back spoke at Washington. I was getting goosebumps even then. That how many women got, all got into the banking system at one shot. It's amazing, because you do completely paperless account opening, right? e-KYC. But nobody else leverages e-KYC. That's a very interesting thing. And this comes you will realize when you are in private sector, you will realize we all do this mental model that startups are fast, agile. They're not. Startups are equally risk averse and slow, and sometimes they're.
Geo did, right?
Geo did. After all the things, Geo did pull off the largest coup in one sense, right? e-KYC beyond the banking. Banking was already using it because it made sense to them. But nobody, how many times you ask AHL and BSNL and all these guys to say, your SIM card issuance and activation takes 24 hours with a form, CAF, customer acquisition form, filled up, then triplicate and make somebody literally takes the files from these shops and takes it, scans it, stores it, because Telecom Authority wants it to be stored for 7 years, KYC forms. It makes, this is free. Why then we are already a billion people, right? Billion people. Why would you not give issue? They say, we'll do it, and all that thing happened. And then Geo got licensed, and this is where you need challengers, right? When you realize challengers versus incumbents, challengers can move the rock. They are in enterprise challengers. They are not startups, but Mukesh was very, very ambitious. He had 6 months window without regulatory pressure to give free. Otherwise, the regulator was putting pressure because anti-competitive. If you do free, he used 6 months plan to give zero SIM cards with no paperwork, completely under regulatory, because the regulator already approved e-KYC to 100 million people. 100 million people got SIM card in 6 months. Geo effect. And then the story, the rest is history. India went from 1 GB a month per capita consumption to 1 GB a day.
Yeah. And this is the beauty of it, right? So Aadhaar,
e-sign, DigiLocker,
KYC, that leading to mobile phone penetration, that leading to bank accounts, that
then
leading
UPI
to
payments.
UPI.
Yeah.
That's how the stack.
And these are all independent. Very interestingly, there is no one entity who's controlling designing. We are the only common elements in that, okay? Because we just happen to volunteer for some of these. Other than that, these are independent building blocks. We call them like Lego blocks that can be combined to solve, which is what Nitin Kamat Zeroda, for example, proudly says, without India Stack, I wouldn't have been where I am.
And none of these were designed as, I was saying, solutions, right? All of them were designed as platforms that can be leveraged to design solutions
Solutions by the ecosystem.
By the ecosystem. Yeah. And as you were designing these platforms, again, if you come to the principles, what were some of the principles, top, I would say 3 principles that you would keep in mind while designing these?
I think it's a bunch of things, and recently we wrote about it. We have good, document explaining the core principles of digital public infrastructure design. But 3 of them I would call minimalism of the infrastructure, interoperability being the essence of DPI, because without interoperability you can't combine, and combination is what we are after. Yeah. So interoperability being there, and third, I think
unbundling.
Unbundling is a way to get to the minimalistic block, interoperable block. You unbundle the problem statement to get to it, but the principle of interoperability, principle of minimalism, and of course the principle of openness and decentralized. And this we'll talk decentralized more.
Yeah.
That it is essential that such national critical infrastructure is designed not as a central monolithic system, as decentralized and federated as possible. So every time we had mechanism to federate it or decentralize it, we would continue to do that. Aadhaar we had to do specifically because it was a centralized attestation of identity, but everything else is federated or decentralized. Yeah. These things are very key in my mind all the time.
Got it. And if you also think of solutions, how many solutions have gotten built on this, both by the government as well as outside of the government?
Yeah.
What are the 3 solutions that come to your mind that are most satisfying when you look at it? You say, "Wow, this is what we unlocked." What would be those?
Every time we see a solution, we actually feel wow, but it's just because, I think we are yet to see. Frankly, we are yet to see the effect of a lot of things we are doing. Many of you will also start to build more and more on top of it. But one, DPT is huge. We, by the way, went from under 20% bank account penetration to 85% bank account penetration in 7 or 8 years. There's no country has pulled off so many
exponential growth.
Yeah, exponential change. And as I said, banking never went to villages. Banking went, bankers never went. So it's one of those things. The banks never went. Bank branches never went. Banking went. Today, India Post literally does that in front of a doorstep of a pensioner. So my grandmother is 105 years old, and she gets pension at her home. And I can see it's lovely. So it's amazing. Bank account penetration and direct benefits transfer. Just change the complete all the schemes delivery. We have so far spent $330 plus billion over the rail, money rail. We are the only country where 860 plus million people can directly receive money instantly. It's just crazy. The scale that we managed to put that.
People like during
COVID,
we was writing checks.
Absolutely. US was writing checks. And they were writing checks to wrong people. After that, my friends who are well off got checks. They shouldn't have got a subsidy check. Come on. Indians are, they're most earning. Top population there. They should have got anything. But anyway, it's because they don't have a clean registry. If you don't have a clean registry, if you don't have a way to move money, you tend to, and Germany made that statement that we will take decades before we want to do something like India. We have no way to send benefits. And with AI and job disruption coming, universal income, universal income is being talked about everywhere, but nobody has that kind of rail in India. But there is some interesting innovation as well. UPI, of course, I pretty much think everybody is using UPI here, I would presume. Yeah. UPI is such, again, you will see on the roadside, the guy, what a beggar who is putting a QR code to share, change, sir, not a problem, scan and send. That means even they have bank account. It's just amazing how much stuff that happens. These are really things that people, when they come here, they see that, and even if however number of times you explain them, when they travel here and they see the coconut vendor, roadside vegetable vendor, no lights, some temporary thing with a QR code, they see the change, right? And then private innovation like Paytm innovated that speaker very well now, others are also doing, brilliant innovation. We have DigiLocker, which is starting to come. We designed DigiLocker in 2016. We were pushing DigiLocker. It's always time for everything, so eventually it opened up. It's good to see that happening. We are not scratched the surface. We are not. There's so much opportunity. Where is the opportunity?
What are some of the, because some ways this India Stack is also democratized innovation, right? So really any startup can kind of use the India Stack to build and innovate on their own. What are some of the innovations you foresee upcoming, and we can trust the startup ecosystem to do that? What would you like to see?
I'd like to see a lot of stuff. But we are already seeing ONDC commerce being democratized. Okay, Namayatri, if you are here using Namayatri, you would see that being democratized. Mobility, urban mobility democratized, but much more. Things like when you walk in, and I'm a traveler, I travel quite a lot, and when you travel, you will see hotels still taking your ID card, disappearing somewhere, making a copy and coming back. This is 2023. Why didn't I do a digital ID verification, DigiLocker integration, or do a self-checking? Airports I can go through without paper. Why the hotel checking? Come on. But who will do this? This startup. I think this is where you need an innovator ecosystem to bridge the gap between that entity who is like a hotel, running a hotel, to provide that tech, to make the convenience to come through. And every time you see convenience being broken or access being broken, that's a problem statement for you. Every time you say, why do I need to do all this thing? You don't need to do all that thing. So solve it. And every time you see an access problem, that people are unable to access something, it's too fragmented, like blue collar. Jobs today, urban company and all is trying to bring it in, but it's still way too fragmented. Look at country scale. How does a plumber or a good carpenter come about and create their own reputation score, their differentiated earning potential for them to be able to participate. Today we go in truck and recruit from the junctions in various towns. If you go to various towns, you will see the cities, you will see.
You have these.
Junctions where people, Mason and all these guys hang around. There are only two Masons and inhuman. Come on. We is because we have not bridged that gap yet. But I'm very optimistic that we will, everywhere you will see this fragmentation, access issue and friction. You can use it. And it's all other opportunities.
And I'm a big believer that will happen. It's a matter of time. And the way the startup ecosystem is coming
Our entrepreneurial energy is just awesome.
Let's shift gears a little bit, Pramod. Now, in the last couple of years, we know that the thinking is evolving from platforms to digital rails.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm going to kind of use the analogy of railways. And platforms is what you have on stations, and the rails are which run across the entire kind of country, and then multiple stations or multiple platforms can be built on top of that. But I want you to explain that, Pramod, to everyone here. What's the fundamental difference? Why do we need digital rails and platforms are not enough? What are some of the pitfalls of platforms, for instance?
No, pitfalls of platforms. Only few platforms are problematic. Okay, first of all, what happens in real world as well is that the platforms are where the economic activity is happening. Platforms are the city, but they are connected by the rail. So the rails move economic value. Think of that, rails move economic value. Then digital rails move economic value digitally. And that's what internet did. Internet HTTP protocol and HTML standard, the two standards really allowed two parties to exchange information, conduct transactions, and drive economic value for themselves. Or knowledge or any value for themselves in that sense, right? And that's what physical rails do too. So our thinking is being, if you have only one platform, then two problems happen. One, that one platform cannot scale to the population. Universality doesn't come through with one platform, okay? That's always almost the case. It's somewhat dangerous in one sense. If one platform literally takes over the whole country or whole world, it will never happen. So that's why Twitter versus Threads, right? In the sense, it will all be split and it will be multiple platforms. So the real question then is that if there are multiple platforms, how does interoperability happen? And without interoperability, silo efforts will happen.
And also a challenge with one platform is that they can kind of they become too powerful.
Too monopolistic.
Monopolies, right?
They
So extract a lot of value.
Yeah,
We're seeing that. We're seeing that in e-commerce. We're seeing that in food delivery. We're seeing that in mobility, in apps and all, right? So that's the challenge with one monolith.
And we speak that all the time. By the way, if we did not have HTTP and HTML and the open internet architecture, if we did not have it, we would have still had internet and content consumption, but Netflix will. Think about it. If we didn't have internet, we would have been today subscribing to content. Quite like video, audio content, we would have been today you can, if you have a great blogger, if you have a great video, you are so democratized that your blog server is discoverable, browsable, with no intermediary stopping you saying unless you list yourself in that platform, the other counterparty can't discover you. That problem is not there is the internet. You are discoverable directly. That's very, very interesting analogy you should keep in mind. So when the platforms get too large, they extract value. And that's always an issue for two issues. One, participants in that platform like Uber drivers in Uber or hotels in Airbnb and any of those delivery restaurants in Swiggy or Zomato. They start seeing less and less value accruing to them. And they would say, I have to do all the hard work, but commission is very, very high, right? So it's like saying, there's only one marriage broker, right? Or one intermediary. It's the same issue. That means they can extract as much commission as they want because you have no choice. Choice is removed from your system. When agency and choice is removed, it's a dangerous thing for a society. And from a systemic perspective, from governments and regulators' perspective, it becomes a systemic risk also. Because one company dominating the whole thing, it's anti-competitive, becomes anti-competitive or it becomes systemic risk. Because if that company shuts down or something happens, it's a huge issue in the society, right? So we were looking at internet as the inspiration. Why did we have internet so decentralized connected by protocols like HTTP and standards like HTML, but everything on the internet became a platform-centric story. Very interesting, right? All the economy was centered around platforms, but the network itself was decentralized and open. So we were asking this question, and Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the father of WWW, has written this, that we will go towards semantic web and then transactional web eventually, right? What does it mean? It will mean network should be able to transact over the network. You should be able to transact, not just exchange content. Otherwise, what happens is the transaction occur on a platform. When the transaction occur on a platform, the platform becomes the powerful intermediary that is going to hold the control, right? In one sense, Amazon, Uber, all the same story. Nothing wrong, and they showed brilliant innovation, by the way. Without that story, we would have never talked about this problem statement, right? They innovated brilliantly on the internet. How could we imagine on a click of a button I could book a taxi or a hotel? Today, half of these youngsters wouldn't even go out and eat, they're lazy, they'll be sitting around the evening, weekends, Swiggy, Zomato, order food. I mean, it's taken for granted, right? And India is perfectly positioned for that service economy as well, because our service industry is very, very large. So, we were asking the next question. We were asking the question, what would it take for us to create a network view, an interoperable network view, like a MasterCard Visa network, although they are private networks, it's a network play. And UPI was a public network, it's not a private network, public network, because MasterCard is a for-profit entity, UPI, NPC is a not-for-profit entity, and UPI is a public good. But they are all network play. And we have seen air ticketing being a network play. So we have seen, world over, even before internet, Sabre and Amadeus literally brought the aggregator play and brought, a travel agent in Timbuktu sitting in that character screen could book a flight in India, and the connected network was brought in. So the construct of an interoperable network, whether it's in travel or payment or internet itself, we have seen it.
And that's where Beckon was involved.
That was the origin for us to be able to push our boundary, because by then we were 2017, we already had tasted the success of UPI. And then I was asking the question, why not? Look at if UPI can move money, and account aggregator and DPG can move data, and email, SFTP can move messaging, HTTP can move content, why not a protocol that moves transaction contracts? And we asked this question. By then, Web3 and all was starting to pick up, so we started this foundation, open source effort called Backend Protocol. And if you have not seen it, you should see it's new kid in the block. Backend Protocol is open source protocol that enables any consumer to discover any provider resources anywhere on the network and actually transact. Book that resource, and buy that resource if you want to, if it's viable. So if you have a charging station, electric charging stations, how do you know that's free? One way to think about it is, like in IM, you have all these charging stations here. How do you know it's free? How do I know if I'm going to be in 10:30, can I book that charger from 10:30 to 10:45? None of it is possible. And the immediate way to think about it, you will start thinking, maybe I'll build an app. And we are thinking, no. Building one app is only going to solve probably the campus part. What happens to charge stations outside? What happens in the highway? There will be many apps, right? Many people like you who will go and say, I have 20 chargers in my network. How does we create a discoverable network that allows me to discover charging points anywhere over the network and discover them, book them, and create a contract, dynamic contract between them, and actually pay for it and fulfill it.
Yeah. So discovery, ordering,
fulfilling,
and post-fulfillment,
and all digitally contracted. Yeah. So very, very audacious goal, and it was crazy. People couldn't understand. People still don't fully understand it.
Yeah.
And the origins of ONDC and origins of the Mayatri came from there.
Yeah. So you can explain, because I know it's
Still
still kind of later start. You can explain it through ONDC.
Yeah, ONDC was a good example. So if you have, let's say, some products to buy or food to order, today you go to one platform, but you will only find restaurants acquired by that platform or listed by that platform. And you will go to another platform, you will see sometimes common ones because they list many of them common, listed in multiple places, but sometimes different. And then if you want new restaurants, the problem with this model goes back to his earlier point, is that it's very hard to play this dual-sided aggregator game. So you need a lot of capital. So they infuse VC capital and actually rise up. And Swiggy you can see struggling in one sense, Zomato is doing better. So eventually you will have a monopoly or a duopoly at best. The problem with that is restaurants who are not in that network cannot be discovered. Or there may be a home, somebody may be cooking at home, making bakery items. I can see many one-person entrepreneurs who build this, right? You bake very well in the house and they are discovered, but they are not discoverable unless they list themselves as a company and all that thing, right? So we were in ONDC, we were asking the question, how does ONDC work? ONDC is a network. It's not a platform. It has no software. It's like a rail. You can connect Swiggy on one side, Zomato on the other side, or many other platforms like Swiggy and Zomato. There might be some very boutique bakery products only platform, let's say, or chocolate only platform, whatever you want to do. These platforms can connect on one side, and the other side consumers can connect. And consumer now, using any ONDC enabled app, you can discover products across these platforms. That's the difference. Not in just one platform, across the platform, and actually discover them, book them, order them, and fulfill them. Okay? So it is one example of that, but it is even more amplified when you think about homestay or hotels. Megmetric would have accumulated few hotels, but we have hundreds of homestays. Where did the Airbnb has few, Airbnb but has higher commission as well. So how do you discover a local interesting restaurant or an interesting homestay or interesting experience without one platform dominating? Was the approach ONDC. So through ONDC you will be able to now do shopping, goods, hyperlocal goods like grocery and all that thing. Food is taking off like crazy. And Namayati is merging with ONDC to scale across the country. In Calcutta, we are going to launch for urban mobility, and very soon in tourism. That's going to be big for us.
So basically, OpenNet for digital commerce, ONDC is firstly kind of domain agnostic. So as Pramod was saying, it is kind of food, it's kind of stay, it can be kind of e-commerce like Flipkart, could be other stuff.
Ticketing or things like that.
And it can unbundle. It unbundles the different steps in the process. So discovery, you can discover from all the platforms. Right? Then you can order on any one of them.
Think of ONDC like internet.
Exactly.
Imagine internet.
Like through UPI, which is again a platform. Then somebody has to fulfill and deliver the thing to you. Now that can be other service provider.
ONDC, by the way, people like Shadowfax and Danzo in real time bids for ONDC transactions. In real time. It's amazing. It's like how real time bidding. Nobody has a bilateral contract in ONDC saying that, okay, if I have a restaurant says I can fulfill this product, and a delivery agency in real time does an ONDC transaction saying that I'll pick it up.
And so that person is delivering, and then you're kind of giving feedback, everyone is getting
paid. Multiple people. It's a network of logistics guys, product guys, all coming. It's just sort of wacko idea, but it's
exactly. And that's what
India is anyway doing it. So
Pramod, that the way this is getting built, the India digital public infrastructure has gotten built over the last decade, it's continuing to get built. It's fundamentally different from the way it has evolved in the West. Right?
Very much.
Very different.
Yeah.
And it's much better in many ways. But if you could explain what are those fundamental differences and why this is the way to go.
I think that it's very important to watch the digitization of overall digitization of the world itself, right? Post-internet. Pre-internet, it was primarily enterprises, large enterprises like large banks, Citibank, JP Morgan, or all Bank of America would buy an IBM computer, IBM mainframe, or large computers like that, and only few people could do it, and they would digitize it. So they would digitize. What are they digitizing? Digitizing their workflows, internal workflows and so on. Or large manufacturing people will do it. Very expensive proposition, few and large enterprises did. Internet opened up that, democratized it much more in terms of starting the digitization, where online shopping and all that things started off, right? But subsequently cloud computing democratized computing itself. So you don't have to buy a computer, buy an IBM. You can get as much power of IBM on a cloud, right? If you want, as you want. Computing is elastic in cloud. That's what happened. So as layers got democratized, innovation went exponential. That's what we see with internet and GPS and cloud, and then of course smartphone. With every human being now walking around with a supercomputer in their hand, it's just crazy stuff that's going to happen. It's not yet happened. Much can happen even later. But the way it happened subsequently, the digitization post-internet was all a private play in America, primarily driven by America. American company drove that really well, and from the valley, brilliantly well. Cloud, Amazon Cloud, or Amazon Shopping, or Google, and all the Yahoo before that, and we have folks from Yahoo here. I can see my friend home here. So all of those private efforts. Private efforts are brilliantly pushed innovation to Uber, subsequently transportation commerce, Airbnb much later, and we'll continue to see that American way of doing. There is nothing wrong. Brilliant innovation cycles that kick in there.
The Indian way.
Ambitious American way, because their government doesn't come in the way at all. And the only time Washington wakes up is when you get too big. When you become too big, like Microsoft acquisition right now, Lina Khan is trying to stop it in one sense to see whether it's anti-competitive and so on. Or asking Amazon to be broken up is a classic example of reaction from America, Washington. That's pretty much their reaction. Very funny. Internet actually originated in Europe and US, between Europe and US, right? Internet was all about interoperability and openness. The rails I'm talking. But they built no rails after that. So the payment became private. Underlying rails became private. Commerce became, everything became private. In Europe, China, it's better to speak China then. China, of course, we had a massive creation of the duopoly, the two companies that rise up, Alibaba, Tencent. Fantastic, huge. But the Chinese regime is supreme, and they are always in control, and they demonstrate that they are in control, and powerfully, put a clutch on these companies and say, we're going to control you, right? So Chinese way of doing is very different. Wrong, right, who knows? They are doing their own stuff, so developing their own thing. Europe, on the other hand, is stuck neither here nor there. Actually, we feel bad for Europe, because Europe, they don't trust the government because of the war history. They have their own war history. They are much more socialistic in their thinking. Much of Europe is that way. They don't like American companies, capitalistic companies. So they don't know what to do, and they come up with more and more laws. GDPR, Digital Markets Act, Interoperability Act, so they pushed iPhone USB, right? So some things they do well, some things, otherwise with the proprietary codes, they would push for interoperable things. Yeah, but, the big companies have now, it's a rounding error, 1 billion fine is a rounding error for them, $1 trillion company, nothing matters to them, a $3 trillion company. So it's baked into their sales cycle, I think, paying fine in Europe. That's what they do. And they move on. India, on the other hand, is very peculiar. We are not going to go back to pre-92. We are not going to be that socialistic or saying everything. BSNL can't run our shop. And Air India can't run our shop anymore. We are done with that. We are not going back. But we are also not that capitalistic as US because of our inclusion problem. Much of our society needs uplifting. much of our society needs handholding. Much of our society needs opening up access to banking, access to capital. We are one of the most capital, starved SME sector in India, right? They don't get money. 10,000 crore is easy to get. Students, you get a lot of money, student loan and all that thing, because once you're in IIM, you get salary after that. So, but an SME struggles to get it, right? So we are much more, as NRN would call compassionate capitalism, or what other words we keep using. We have no particular word. But we are also democracy. So we are like US in democracy. We are like an African, sub-Saharan African nation for per capita income. We are as good as Ethiopia, by the way. But we are extremely bullish about our development. Our economy is going through the roof because we are fourth now, fourth very soon, and third in no time. Okay. Given UK's situation, we are going to be third in no time. So I think we are very good. We are in a very, very good place in one sense to address this peculiar combination of democracy, inclusion, innovation, capitalistic innovation thinking, startup innovation thinking, but not giving up our democratic and socialistic, inclusion roots, right? So I think our approach has been through what we call digital public infrastructure. We said we cannot simply outsource everything to private. Not going to cut it. And almost always, even Indian companies will struggle. It simply will end up digitally getting colonized. That's all it's going. We had enough of other colonization. We'll have digital colonization. Things like map today. We have no play. We have only one company driving the entire map. Map is no more a wartime tool. Is no more a tool. It's an economic asset. But it's outsourced, right? We are completely given up. So we have to do much more. But we said this bullishly. I think Aadhar gave that belief that we can build our own digital public rails, money rail, commerce rail. That brings, what does it bring? Level playing ground, some sort of level playing ground for our own innovators. Bring inclusion through interoperability and also scale. Our scale and diversity is not uniform like
population scale.
Yeah, population scale, and it's like all of Europe put together, even beyond that, right? So many languages, so much of culture, so much diversity, so much differences. One solution, one platform won't cut it. So we were very focused on building, like the way we built telecom network, like the way we built internet. We were building payment network, and commerce nets, and health network, and so on, but not solutions. We were simply driving protocols and standards like HTTP and HTML. In the case of health and education, to say, no, it's your problem. Innovators must rise up and say, now I can, like Nitin Kamath in Zerodha, or our friends here, Samir or Rahul in PhonePe, they put up their hand and say, I don't mind playing the game. And here's a playground for us to play as a billion people waiting for the solutions to come to them.
And therefore, India's digital journey is very different, as you just explained, from everyone else.
And that's why we are able to inspire African nations, LATAM, South Asia, because global South is very similar.
And G20 presidency that we have this year is a good kind of springboard to that. The government is also using it well. I've attended a few forums and there's a lot of interest, a lot of pull in what's happening in India. Now you've also started some institutional efforts to really enable that kind of offering to the world and sharing the learnings.
Yes, and G20 effort, definitely we brought the idea of DPI, digital public infrastructure, as a means to create inclusion and innovation. Not inclusion at the cost of innovation, government doing everything, or innovation at the cost of inclusion, where only private players are playing and they will play only to the top of this pyramid because they are paying and capable people, right?
So let me shift gears a little bit, Pramod. Listening to you in the last hour, everyone here would think that you are kind of very logical, analytical, you are all of that, cerebral, right? Somebody who thinks from this thing, a very left brain kind of a person. But I know that you kind of have very strong intuition and you kind of bring that together to kind of take decisions and use that, deploy that in your work. What are things that you did early on in your life? And I'm sure not by design that I want to develop the right side of my brain and all, but what are things that you did as a kid and through the years that helped you kind of use both sides of your brains to kind of do work, and how do you deploy
Very, very interesting question. So, I'm born with some lucky enough to be born to a teacher, school teacher. And my mom is a school teacher, and so she's a fantastic storyteller. Beautiful storyteller. I could sit for hours listening to her. She's a Malayalam teacher, so she's a writer and all that. I don't know, write off for it. Her mother, my grandmother, she's still alive. She's a great storyteller. So I realized we did inherit some storytelling capability. And and subsequently you realize how much storytelling means to developing your career, right? So storytelling is about connecting to the heart. It's not connecting to the brain. Brain will connect because we are engineers. And numbers, Excel sheets, we can work through it. But connecting heart drives audacious goals, larger goals, and larger reason why as a leader you can lead the team is because people are not looking at Excel sheets and saying, oh, we are inspired. They get inspired by something bigger than themselves. And then you can see that Nandan doing that to us and a lot of us trying to do that. So storytelling is a very key. So I continue to build that very, very important attribute. Inherited, I presume. But and then second, I am also born in an artist family. I paint and draw from as early as when I was 3-year-old. I still remember drawing a train. I still remember getting first prize or something for a black train. At that time, it was, by the way, it was not even electric. It was one of those coal trains. Okay, that's why it was all black. For good reason. Steam engine. Yes, steam engine. And I still remember that black train. Everything was black, round trains. And then I continued to develop that. I continued to develop my artistic skill. Continued to do that during my college. Continued to draw. I think how did that help is subsequently my PhD, my mathematics background and PhD helped me work through abstraction thinking. And that was very key for me, at least for this. Because how do you think of something like backend protocol when out of the thing, you have to think of something like HTTP, and as big as that, is a lot of abstraction. You need a lot of abstraction. But abstraction without visualization and storytelling is very hard. So I think this helped me very much in terms of creating visual pictures in my head. So a lot of times I take a lot of time thinking about it. And UPI is a classic example. 2013 to 2014, I wrote nothing on paper. Nothing on paper. By 2014, I already knew how the UPI network is going to be designed. So it was in my head right all the time, because once you feed it in and you wake up every few days thinking about you have to do it, and you're thinking about it, you're thinking about how did internet work, what are the basics, and the best part was I knew nothing about payment. I'm not from financial industry. So the good knowledge is a curse half the time, and you realize that the fact, if you think you know, you're probably screwing up yourself, right? In the sense that the more fact that you think you know is a bad starting point for innovation, okay? Because you should be actually not knowing is so easy that you could ask stupid questions. I was in Mumbai asking all kinds of questions to people. What do you mean money? What is money? And we know our money. But what happens in ledger? What is settlement? What is clearing? What does it do? Then I realized, this is all it is. So then I designed UPI. If banker had designed UPI, you would have got a better IMPS. I'm telling you. You would have not got a UPI, right? So it was a very interesting, and I had to really fight that battle with Mumbai in one day. So I think it's important to abstract, reapply, but visualize a lot more, and then subsequently storytell. And a lot of my ideation is a lot of times storytelling that touches the heart more than the brain. So sometimes inherited, sometimes planned, and I spoke sentence on English till I got to teenage. I didn't know. I couldn't speak English at all. Malayalam. All schooling, everything was in. Yeah. I was not even English medium. I was in a small village. So I had to struggle a lot to prepare to speak English. That was a big thing. But if you have the will, you're.
I'll ask a couple of more questions on behalf of the audience, and I'm also looking at the watch. I want to open it up for everyone. But I've heard you say in the past that if young people surround themselves with the right set of folks, and do things not just with the mind but also with the heart, then they'll generally get right things right.
That's only from my learning, by the way, because I was never the top of the class. I was not even good enough, I think, to get to the top of the class. But I think it was a blessing, because I think. And I told both my daughters, what I've heard this like 1,000 times, thousands of times. I would have said, life is like a marathon race. You have to be part of the top cluster only. Don't try to be the top, because you'll just burn out. They rotate. Marathon guys rotate, or cyclists rotate. Purposely. You can't be leading all the time. You tire yourselves out, okay? You burn yourselves out early. So we had this mental model of being there but not there, okay? So not the top, because I was not even good enough, I think. That meant, look at Aadhar. We had most brilliant people, right? 2 or 3 people, or UPI, or much of our work is I am surrounded by people who are better than me all the time. And I know they are better than me. They also know they are better than me. But that is brilliant. It's like playing chess with a better player, or tennis with a better player. That means you're constantly improving, right? Yeah. And this happens to entrepreneurs. I'm telling you, this is what the difference in value versus here. Now starting to happen here, because second generation entrepreneurship is kicking in. In Bangalore, is peculiarly Bangalore culture, very, very open. And you can literally meet Samir or any of these guys. They would happily share stuff with you as a new entrepreneur. Bangalore is very Spanish or same culture. When you're surrounded by people who have done these big things before, you're exponentially learning. Your learning is no more linear. You're exponential all the time, but you are not the top. Because then you are nobody to question, you are nobody to learn from. That's a bad setup to be in. So I think the only request I always have to people, surround yourself with better people. Yeah. And it's very hard to do when you are a topper. And many of you will face this. Because IIT is a bad setup. It's a good setup for you. Very congratulations. But it might screw up your mind a little bit.
And let's so many people sitting here, just thinking that how do I become Dr. Pramod Varma, or how do I kind of contribute like he's been able to do? What would be your answer?
No, I think there is so much to do here. There is nothing peculiarly good about, special about us. I think we were driven, absolutely driven, inspired to do audacious, crazy stuff, knowing that every one of these things we knew we were going to, very, very high chance we'll fail. The probability of failure was so high that we had nothing to lose. Because anyway we were going to fail, right? So how does it matter? But if you are seeing yourself playing safe game, then you are not pushing yourself very well. Because that's a safe game. If your probability of succeeding is very high, you are not pushing yourself. So to do something big, you need to go out of your comfort zone. And going out of your comfort zone means collaborating heavily and going out of your domain strength. And that means you are relearning. Every time I am thrown into healthcare, I have no idea, I am not a useful doctor, I am completely not a medical doctor who is useful to society. So I have to learn all these medical terms and understand how does this work, how does labs, what happens, what do we do, what do we do, democratize access to healthcare, So I think being out there in a very, very discomforting situations, that you are going to fail, but surrounded by very good people. Surrounded by good people in an extremely uncomfortable situation, you are very good. Okay, that's the situation you want to be in.
Yeah. One day you're doing the Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission, next day you're doing National Digital Education.
At least time. I'm helping build. Yeah.
Cool, great Pramod. So let's now open it up for the audience, and if you raise your hands, I'll get a mic for you. Can somebody help me with the mic? Let's take the first question here and the second one.
Hello, sir. Good evening. My name is Vijay. Firstly, thank you to both of you for a very enlightening session. So I have two questions for you. My first question is, as you said, you transitioned from a commercial or private sector, taking up a challenging program like this. Like how challenging it was for you, and what were some of the key learnings? And the second question is, like Aadhar being a very transformational program and very complex one, the acceptability is very key there. So, as you said, the powerhouses, one is the political side and the other is the bureaucratic side. How did you manage to have the alignment?
Yeah, I wish Nandu was here to answer. He would have answered much better. But the first one, my transition from private to public was shocking. Quite shocked, but I'm actually quite comfortable. As a person, as an individual, I'm quite comfortable in being in uncomfortable situations. And I love meeting people, learning all the time. I'm generally a learner. So, and I don't fight with people. Or I don't come across that much fighting to people. So I think maybe some of that helped being in Delhi bureaucratic situation where officers, expect to be called sir, stand up when you go in. This is all not used to. Private sector guys are not used to. Actually with IT, right? IT, we are used to American way of doing things. We have first name basis, Nandan, we'll say, right? But they don't say, what do you mean? You're calling me names, right? So we had significant disconnect. So they would not, there was a lot of trust issues as well. Because they were thinking, why are you volunteering? What is in for you? First of all, they ask the question, it's not obvious to them. What do you mean by you are doing free stuff? It makes no sense. You quit your job, good job, global CTO of a large billion-dollar company. I quit that. Why? So first 6 months, we are figuring out who is this guy, right? And we are also figuring out who are these people, right? Who would behave in a particular way. But I think if we are open, I think you have to be open to collaboration, open to culture, open to people. And I love traveling. I was a traveler, mountaineer, trekker. So I love culture, language, people. So some of that helped me to see through. And our goal was so large, it was beyond our numbers, right? Even when promised Dr. Manmohan saying 600 million in 4 years. That means 1 million people would have to give an Aadhar every day, continuously, to get to that number. So goal was so large that we couldn't fight much, because we had to do bigger work, right? I think it was big change, but I think if you are open enough, you will see that even when you travel in American culture, European culture, Asia, you will see that cultural difference. You have to be very, very open enough to culturally open to, and not on your face, kind of a personality, to be a genuinely humble learning person. Because I was learning, I didn't know anything about bureaucracy, I didn't know anything about, and there was a reason why everything was RTI-able, so they had very strict rigor about that. Second one, how do we convince people? Because I think minimalism, going back to the minimalism, was very key for us. Value articulation was key, and identifying first winner application, what we call winning application, was key. So the cooking gas cylinder, the health scheme, cooking gas cylinder everybody used was very key, and opening bank account, a no-frill account was also key. So that was a few, you have to get few, what's called winning implementation, and that unlocks value in society. When people see, I can also do, that's how it happened. Food and all, we still have, only now, PDS, fertilizer, we still haven't done DBT fully. So when 12 years later, it's not obvious where we will do and where we will.
Yeah.
I had a question. We talked about Aadhaar, e-KYC,
DigiLocker. Oh, okay, sorry, yeah.
DigiLocker and everything, and you talked about APIs being a driver for them because people have to, for adoption, and all of this happened in 5-6 years, over 1 billion people registering, right? So, since you cannot control the structural architecture of those companies using these APIs, that creates a backdoor for privacy concerns, right? And even even if there are no privacy concerns, if let's say a mass hysteria of privacy concerns sets in, it puts a full stop on the whole thing.
Yeah, so the privacy concern is always there. As you digitize the society, and digital is inevitable, there is no way we are going to go back to paper and to give up our smartphones and computers and all that thing. Not happening. When that happens, privacy is always happens because as you digitize, everything is in some system. And now we don't know what is like the Facebook fiasco, completely private, but still people ask what's going on behind the scene, data access and all that thing, or fake news problems, and everything else that comes with societal issues that comes with it. So privacy is very key. But one of the design principles was to federate it. It's not centralize it. That means our argument always been, you can't say don't digitize. Bank will digitize. But why should the banking data go anywhere else other than where the transaction occurred? See, if you can keep the data where it occurred, and then the chance of all that data, like a honeypot, collecting, getting attacked, is almost minimized, right? So federating data is a very, very key element. Second, minimizing data. In each system when you build, you have to ask, are you collecting more than what you need to collect? So the API, exposing the API itself was not a privacy problem. But overall digitization, if every hospital is digitized, if every bank is digitized, does it mean government will, or some private company will have all your healthcare and financial data? That sounds scary to you, that sounds scary to me, scary to everybody. So to keep, one is federated. Say no centralization of data whatsoever to make sure. So some of these applied in India's architecture, India's DPI architecture, we have no centralized data store of any transaction system. In fact, we are so ahead in our account aggregator network, our data network of financial data. It's so decentralized, people still figuring out, even Estonia, if you look at Europe, they all have a data exchange center in the middle through which data goes. Here we have peer-to-peer. There is no centralized data. That means nobody can tap it, nobody can attack, including government and surveillance, or private companies can steal. It's very, very interesting architecture patterns, but privacy continues. Anyway, our privacy bill just went through. So now, privacy sub also will go through, and hopefully we'll have beyond IT Act. We already had IT Act, but beyond that, we always wanted a privacy bill. So hopefully it will come through. Even then, Indians are not, Indian system, your question will remain in the sense that, are we law-abiding? How many of you stop at the red light? Everything is grayscale, Indians live in grayscale. Right? Everything is orange cloth. So that's how I think we are a maturing society. We are not yet a fully mature economy yet. So, and also our number of people, supply demand mismatch continues in many cases. So there will be leaks, data leaks and other issues. We have to learn through it and go through it. But I'm hopeful there are democratic institutions and civil society, and all of us will eventually end up doing the right things. Non-digitization is not a choice. You can't go back in time. Yes, please.
So congratulations on your tremendous achievement. And when you contrasted the US model with the India model, and you said that US you have a lot of private trades versus India, I was curious who's going to pay for this digital rails that the public goods over the long term.
Yeah.
And secondly, a lot of this happened because people like you in London got involved. I mean, in America, somebody like you would have made lots of money in the traditional capitalist model, but here, I don't know. What were your incentives?
Why are you doing what same question?
Okay. So I'm just curious now. The reason I'm asking is, if let's say if another country wants to replicate your success, what would be the financial incentives which will drive a digital public good to kind of sustain over a period of time? What sort of the incentive?
So the cost of DPI is cost and sustenance. DPI is very, very little. You'll be surprised. In fact, Nandan made this statement in Washington when he was presenting. DPI approach. That was the costliest of this because it was a biometric identity system. Plus DigiLocker, plus e-sign, plus UPI, plus account aggregator, which is a financial data network, all put together. For example, India Stack in general, as we call India Stack, all put together, Indian government has so far, in 14 years, we have spent $2.5 billion, roughly around that. This is nothing for India $2.5 billion because simply the savings from direct benefits transfer. That also not state level schemes, central schemes like the cooking gas and all that thing, right? Was $27 billion. So Indian government saved $27 billion just from one program, DPG program, just from the state. But the whole spend in 14 years is been $2.5 billion. So it doesn't need deep pockets, as Nandan said. It needs deep conviction. That's what he said. UPI thinking is not costly. Account DigiLocker, for example, Indian government has said $6 billion. That's it. 2014, 15 we lost. 7, whatever, nearly 10 years later, 8 years later, we have $6 million. Nothing. So it's not money issue at all. But you need to create economic value on top of it. So UPI particularly made free was a discussion that was interesting debate that went through India went through, right? We said we can, and the argument has been we are a cash heavy society. We have 50 million people, 50 million, we are less than that, 30 million. In 2015-16, we had less than 30 million people who are doing digital payments. Today we have 500 million people doing digital payments. 500. Okay, this is like a 10x plus growth. So I think there was a larger intent that overtook that thing, moving money from a debit account. That was only debit account. Moving money from a debit account to a debit account should be as free as moving message. That was India's sort of a philosophical call daily made, because it would save our cash handling cost, everything else on top of it, bring people to the digital economy in general, because we saw that 500 million, 50 million to 500 million growth. So I think it has resulted in it, but UPI alone and all value-added services on UPI is chargeable. So PhonePe, if you look at, they make money out of insurance, bill payments, ticketing, now of course commerce, ONDC and all that they're doing. So they're being layered value. So idea was, should the rail be open and interoperable like internet? And how much would it cost and to sustain the rail? And this answer to you is extremely little. And so little, e-sign was zero. Government spent money. And account aggregate was zero rupees. Not 1, 0 rupees so far. Okay? So it's important to understand it doesn't take months actually to run a DPS story. And what's my incentive? That's my incentive. I think if I had done anyway, I was already midlife crisis. 2009, I was already doing good. I did startup and we grew, we were acquired. We were large caps, startup, building proper products, large products for all the retail around the world, retail companies. It was a good change. And what was the risk anyway? Look at the risk. Risk was low. Even 1 year later, Aadhar had flopped. It's okay, right? 1 year you took risk, right? 1 or 2 years. So I asked, with my wife, that question, simple. Do we have enough savings to risk 2 year birth rate? And it looked like we could do 2 year, right? And then we continue that way. That's all it happened. We have similar questions.
Let's take the question.
I have a question for you and Gaurav sir both. May I ask that?
You go ahead and ask.
Yeah. So sir, my question to you is that as Gaurav sir mentioned that we are living in a decade and there's a lot of talk about Bitcoin that's going on. So do you see India adopting to Bitcoin as a nationwide currency? And if it does, we have talked about the commonality that we have built over the years, that the beggar is also putting a QR code and the rich person is also using the QR code. So do you think that this innovation might be a downfall for the bridges we have built?
I can answer that.
Yeah.
And you have a question for him also, you didn't have a
Yes, I do have a question for you as well. So sir, I have been working in the impact space for the last 3 years and I have seen organizations, especially when it comes to social impact, trying hard to even exist. So if you could just maybe share one of the key experiences that you have faced in your journey at Samagra and how you have been able to thrive, not just exist in this space, in the impact space, that would be really helpful.
Sure.
So, my question is a bit personal. So, like you talked about goosebumps when finance minister were talking in Washington, and last one hour the way you're talking, the way you're discussing, like you're bubbling with enthusiasm. So like most of us will agree that. So like what keeps you going on a daily basis? Like that's my question.
That's excellent. Okay, that's it.
I think that's
Okay.
the time.
Okay, good. So your question was Bitcoin. We will never have Bitcoin as a currency. Currency is very sensitive topic, and there's only one currency, rupee. We are going to have rupee. We are going to stay with rupee. It's very clear stance by the regulator. No way monetary control is going to be handed over. Policies control. But CBDC, we are doing CBDC. So we are looking at digital currency. Yeah, we are adopting rupee pegged. The CBDC anyway is coming. Pilots are going on. We will have that. But it's not a challenge for the UPI is a rail. Rupee is a rail. Remember that. It moves money from one stored value account to another stored value, irrespective of the currency. UPIs are not about currency. UPI is a rail to move that currency. So you can use UPI to move CBDC. So if I have CBDC, but you want a non-CBDC account, if you have CBDC, how do I pay you? UPI. UPI will be the mechanism to move intercurrency. That's how we are doing Singapore. Singapore merchant, when I go, I can I am doing rupee and they are receiving in Singapore dollars because instantly UPI can move currency, any currency. Yeah. What drives me? I'm generally overexcited person. I think I get excited about a lot of things that we can make things happen, right? I think I'm quite. I care about it deeply. I care about what I love what I do. I care about what I do. So it's not a job. It's what who I am. Whatever I do. By the way, I was like this in the private company. I was always bubbling with energy, and I always smile a lot. So I think it has helped me to stay. I think one thing, when I ended up, that's an interesting question he asked. I was not so much smiling when I was young. Somebody who know from school days recently made that comment. He said, "You are a lot more cheerful than how you used to be in high school." I was looking back and said, "Yeah, I remember during my college days, I made it a practice. I practice being optimistic, practice being very, very, very positive. Staying positive. It was a mind game. Right? Half the time, it's not about other people at all. It's about all about you. Half the time you wake up depressed, you wake up upset. You're upset about somebody else. So I think it was just a lot of things practice as well. But maybe innate. Yeah.
Let me take that question last this thing. So I think I strongly believe the challenges in the development space and the impact space are much more complex than those on the corporate side of things. And therefore we need the best minds in the country to really apply them and work on those problem statements. Right? So it's important that those of you graduating from these campuses and Bangalore or others, I think the needle will shift when you guys, instead of going to McKinsey or Google or yesterday's unicorn, you can start taking a call to kind of devote your professional life to the impact space. I think that's when the needle will really move. And we as an organization, as a social enterprise, our attempt has been to create a value proposition that adds up for young talent such as yours. Right? So what's that value proposition? The value proposition, you get to do meaningful, impactful, purposeful work. That's number one, that's top of the stack. With a very steep learning curve, just by the kind of situations you are thrown in and the kind of system you also try to build internally, which is really mentoring focused. You get a steep learning curve. You get a fast growth trajectory like you do in startups. If you're doing very quickly kind of rise as opposed to having to spend a certain number of years at a certain level and so on. And fourth, in terms of compensation, it may not be the best on campus, but it's 70-80% there. Right? So you're kind of giving that discount for the other things. So it's a package deal in that sense, such that the overall value proposition adds up.
Great opportunity to recruit people.
Yeah, we recruit. This is not a but that's also the recruitment pitch for but at the same time, to enable that, to make that happen, we have to take certain tough calls. Right? We exist for impact. That's the only reason why, as an entity, we are there. Our mission is to improve the quality of life of people through better governance. But at a lot of times, you see very, very impactful opportunities. But we have to hold back at times if financially it's not kind of adding up. Right? We cannot be cross-subsidizing and stuff like that because it's a slippery slope. We used to do that in the early years. We burned our fingers. We learned that the hard way. So we don't have the luxury sometimes to kind of and to say no to things. So it's a financial discipline that we've kind of built in over the years, such that we can continue to offer that value proposition that I just talked about to talents such as yours. And it's very, very critical that you start contribute. And that's the kind of try to.
And I see that actually all the time when I work with the new age social entrepreneurs are bringing the private sector rigor, systematic thinking, rigor, ambition, and technology skills compared to traditional NGOs who used to be there, who were on the ground, right? It's not empathy alone or the deep domain understanding. It's about domain empathy, but also to smart way to leverage tech, smart way to scale. How do we get impact? So I think that I see a lot more social entrepreneurs now bringing into forum, because I think we also see a lot of you joining the effort. Yeah, and entropy is very high. You are in a high entropy situation. If you like that, if you thrive in that kind of mode, that's a place to be.
Thank you. Thank you, Pramod.
No, thank you.
Wonderful to have you for this conversation on this